In this video we're looking at some of these Alto speakers. These are the TS315, yeah, TS315. And the fault with these is they sound a bit muffled. The horn, the top end tweeter, as some people call it, compression driver as it actually is, has gone in it, so it's not working. So what we're going to do is just show you in this video how to determine if the actual horn unit compression driver is faulty and needs changing, or if the fault is with the amplifier section itself. This applies pretty much the same to the TS308, 310, 312, 15, whichever version. They're all the same internals pretty much, just different bass driver size. So I'll just first show you a quick demo of what it sounds like now as a before we fix it, and that it's lacking top end. So I'll just play a bit of music through it first. And there's not a lot of clarity and top end sparkle to that. And the same goes for if I talk through a microphone. It's quite muffled and sort of do-do-do, like I'm talking through something, as opposed to the crisp clarity you should be getting. Now anyway, first thing to do is diagnose if the drive unit is blown or if there's a fault with the amplifier, because I've had both on these speakers before. All the Altos, very often this happens. They're just cheap speakers really, so you get what you pay for at the end of the day. So in order to check if it's the speaker drive unit or the amp, what we'll do, we'll take the back panel off, get inside, and if you've got a multimeter handy like this, and you can just set it to the continuity or beeper setting like that, we'll be able to read whether the driver's gone open circuit, and that'll tell us if the horn is gone or not, basically. So in the case of these particular speakers, I've actually already diagnosed them in advance, and I know that it is the compression driver unit, this thing here. This is what goes on the back of the horn for the top end, and these are actually blown. I've already metered and measured them, but I'll show you anyway how to troubleshoot and check that it's this that's bad and not the amplifier. So, because it's pointless wasting your money buying one of these if the fault is on the amplifier. Anyway, the other thing I'm doing in this video, a lot of people, what you see online, they just change this whole unit. And these are not very cheap, even though they're not fantastic units, they're quite expensive to buy replacements of. The other problem you have is, at least with the 315s like this, is it's hard to find a replacement that will physically fit. Because of the handle on the top, this is up tight against it, which I'll show you in a minute when we take it apart. Normally, on other Altos before, I've upgraded them and changed them out for different units. This is a different Eminence unit, just a sample off the shelf, but that's not much bigger, as you can see, and even that will not physically fit in here, so we're going to have to repair these. Instead of replacing this whole unit, I've been able to source a voice coil diaphragm unit, which is this here. So this here is where the wires go in to the driver unit. You can just see at the bottom there on those two pins, and this has got a copper voice coil and the actual moving diaphragm. This is what makes the sound and what makes this unit work. Now we're going to change these by taking this apart. You can see I've already picked the gunk out of the screws on here in advance, but we're going to change that. These are considerably cheaper than these. They're less than half the price usually to buy diaphragms and voice coils versus a whole compression driver unit. So if you can get them and do it this way, you'll save yourself a considerable amount of money. Anyway, let's get on with the diagnosis, and I'll show you how to take it apart, get the unit out and change this. So obviously, what we want to do to get into these, turn them around, take all the screws out around the edge. You can see I've took most of them out, apart from two. You need a Phillips or a Posi 1 size screwdriver, typically, to get these in and out. That's about the best fit. You can use a Posi 2, but these are quite long screws. This will take you a while just to set these out and put them back in. So just go through and undo all of these. Make sure everything's disconnected, obviously, before you're doing this. That goes without saying. And then once you've took the screws out, just sort of give it a bit of a jiggle and persuasion. You can sort of lift it by the sockets, move it here. It's just a sort of case of getting this loose because it has got a little sealed. So once you take this off, just be careful not to pull it out because there are wires connected to it. So you can see we've got this one here that goes down to the bottom. That's for the blue light at the front. And then you've also got these here in this wrap. You may or may not have this on yours. This goes to the bass, woofer and the compression driver tweeter unit. So just be careful of that. What you can do to get a bit more manoeuvrability on this is you could cut this cable tie with some side cutters and just unplug this connector here. Like that, to avoid pulling anything off. So I'm just going to actually do that in this case. Or you could just put the amp to one side and rest it. You just have to be careful not to put too much strain on the connectors. But I'm just going to cut this cable tie. These are a bit overkill cutters, but they'll do the job. There we go. And get that out, take it out the speaker. You don't want it rattling loose if you're cutting it. So that there lets us separate the plate amp out of the way. And then we'll just sort of have that there. And I'll bring you in and I'll probably lie this down on its face, to be honest, then we can work on it and I can show you top down, get better light in it. Okay, so now you can see the back of the compression driver unit itself. There's these two wires that'll go down to it. You want to pull these off. I still can't really get a lot of light in here to show you well. But if you can see, there's the red and the black. And what you want to do is get hold of the spade terminals, one each, and just sort of wiggle and pull them. They'll be quite stiff and they'll take some going out if they've never been off before. These came off relatively easily because I had them off before. But try and grab the top of the blue thing and pull it there. And just do one at a time. Don't try and pull both and don't pull with the wire because you might break them off. So just give it a wiggle side to side, side to side like that and they should come off. Just to show you that close up, I'll just connect it to this one. And see, these are push-on connectors like that, and you try and grab them here and wiggle it like that. Something like that kind of thing. Okay, so now the wires have been taken off the unit here. What we can do is we can just read this and check if it reads open circuit or not. So that means if this is blown. So then we know if the fault is with the amplifier or with the drive unit. So if you get your multimeter, like I mentioned earlier, if you've got one, and continuity beep setting when you touch it together. And if the unit is good and working, it should beep. If it's blown and been overdriven, it won't beep. So here's a good unit, for example, and if I touch the two terminals, it beeps. If I touch the blown bad unit that I've already taken out here and just put it on the two terminals, you don't get anything. So before we unscrew this and mess around, we'll just put the meter probes on it, touch them, and you can see that's not beeping at all. You can't really see in there, but you can see I've got one stud on that side and one stud on that side there, and there's nothing. Just be careful though when you're reading it that you are touching the connectors and not the heatsink, because this aluminium heatsink is conductive and will beep and it might give you false positive. So make sure you're just touching those. Anyway, that's just a quick way. If you want to try it before you purchase and actually go to replace these, that'll tell you whether the amp's at fault or that's at fault. So, quick, easy test if you've got a multimeter. Now anyway, I'll show you how to get this thing out of the cabinet and actually change the voice coil on it. This process is the same even if you're changing the full unit, it just saves the taking this apart piece. Next thing is going to be getting the actual driver unit itself off. Now this is mounted to the plastic horn flare, which is the bit that goes out like that on the cabinet. And you've got to unscrew it, it's got a screw thread. So if you look at this one here that I've already taken off, you can see it screws on that way. So we need to turn it anti-clockwise to get it to come off. Now there is a bit of sort of glue of some kinds, silicone, that holds these on and locks them into place. So they're really stiff to get moving at first. So you need to try and get your hand in and get round it and turn the unit. You may also have this spongy foam stuff. Let me see if I can show you that. If you look at the top there, you can see how there's a piece of like sponge in here. If you can sort of pull that out, that will help you get the horn unit out as well. So just sort of pull it, it should come out. Might break off into two pieces, because otherwise you're moving against that as well. So just try and get that out of the way. They are a real pain in the backside to to change on these units. So then get your hand in, try and get around the whole thing, sort of grip it like that, and try and turn it and free it. They'll be really, really stiff. You might have to get 2 hands in if you can. It's even more awkward because I'm trying to show you on the camera whilst I'm also doing it. If you can't get it to come loose, just by hand, which sometimes you can't, I speak from experience here, this one does prove to be quite a strong one. So if it's really tough, like this one's proving to be, or I just can't get it to turn by hand because it's so tight and glued, I have got another solution that tends to work for me. So another way I've got these out in the past that tends to work is I get an adjustable spanner or something and a buster chisel like this. So this is a relatively narrow but wide chisel. You can try this with screwdrivers, but you will end up moving fins and causing damage like this. This was one that I've done in the past from another speaker. This is what is a spare off the shelf, but this is one that I managed to bend the fins on, because with a screwdriver you've only got one piece of manoeuvrability there. With this you can get it right in between the fins like that, and it gives you a good firm leverage to turn. So by putting this in, if you can find something like this, and this has also got a flattened shaft, which is what makes the spanner sit on it, you can put this on the drive unit. It's still going to be awkward, don't get me wrong, because you can't get a straight hold on the thing, but you can get that in there, and you can get the spanner around the top of the handle on the bolster chisel, and if you push down on the top of the chisel and turn the spanner anti-clockwise, you can usually break the glue loose, and it will take some going on some of them, depending on how much glue they put on it at the factory. Oh, you can hear that just went, and you can hear the like glue giving up there. Yeah. So if I just get that off, move it around again, turn in a bit more. So we can see that's now moving relatively loose. You can see by hand I can sort of turn it. If I go back in, that's just broke it free for us. There will be some resistance as you're turning it because of the glue that's still on there, but just keep turning and turning, and eventually it'll come really loose, and eventually it'll come off in your hand like that. So there you go, there's the driver unit out, and you can see the horn and the flare there, what it screws onto. I'll just show you as well, just these particular cabinets, the handle is so close to the drive unit. As I said, this is not a lot bigger, and it physically won't line up with the thread. Otherwise I would have upgraded and changed these for something different. So with this drive unit out, you can now see there's some screws in the top of it. They've got this like black silicone glue stuff on them, the same as this just had on it holding it in. You can actually see some traces of it still on the thread, like here, and we've got to try and pick that off and take these 3 screws out to replace the diaphragm. If you're just replacing the whole unit at this point, you just get your new one and screw it on. But as I say, you can save a lot of money by doing it this way. So if you get usually a Phillips or a Posi 2 screwdriver, and also a smallish flat screwdriver, you can sort of scrape the gunk out and then put the screwdriver in and undo the screw. I'll go to my bench to do this, because then you can actually put force on it versus trying to do it balanced here. It's just not good. So with a Phillips type screwdriver and a small flat screwdriver, we're ready to take this apart if you're replacing the diaphragm. So get your small flat one first, and just try and sort of be careful as you're doing this not to go off into your hand. Try and poke away from yourself so you don't stab yourself in that. I've done it before. And go around, and you can just sort of see how the silver of the screw is starting to come through as we're scratching this like glue gunk off the top. It just makes it so much easier to get the screws out. Again, this glue they put in just to stop them rattling loose, and probably to also put you off from doing this when they're manufactured, but try and get in the actual screw head here as well and pick it out, because that'll stop the screwdriver from going in. And if your screwdriver doesn't go in far enough, you will end up rounding the screws off, and if you round the screws off in this, you've no chance of getting it out and changing it. You would need a whole new unit if you mess that up. So just take your time, clean as much as you can out of it. I'm probably going to edit a lot of this out, but Only take you about 5-10 minutes to do this. Just keep gradually going at it. And as I say, just be careful not to go too hard yourself. Always be prizing away. Okay, so they're relatively clear now. You can see the screw heads, and I've picked a lot of it out. So just try and find a screwdriver that will go in and fit the screw. Put it down and apply force from above onto it like this, and turn. You may need to sort of turn it a bit and a bit and a bit, and eventually it'll start to go. Maybe if you go forwards and backwards just to break the silicone sealant off, and then you'll get the screw to come out. You can either take the screw actually out completely, which is probably preferable, because then you can get the rest of this gunk out, or you can sort of leave it standing and just take the whole thing off. But just go around and do each one exactly the same again. So you can see that one's come loose. Okay, so when you've got the screws out like that, and the gunk cleared, now once you're going to part this, make sure that you're not getting rubbish falling into the hole, any crap and dirt. You want this to sort of remain as clean as possible, really, because if anything gets trapped in the small groove in the magnet where the voice coil sits, it will cause this to go and problems. So you want this to be a relatively quick and clean changeover. So this is the actual diaphragm and voice coil itself. Get that ready to go. Just lift off the top section here. Sort of part it. You might need to wobble it a little bit, but it will give up eventually, like that. Just a little bit of glue on it. If you're struggling, you can put a little screwdriver in here and sort of just give it a little surprise like that, if need be, but it should separate by hand. Then once you're in it here, you can see the old diaphragm and voice coil. This again, just sort of try and lift it up. You can sort of get it from the edges where the plastic is. This may be quite stiff if you've never changed one before in them, because again they use little bits of glue. So just maybe get a small screwdriver and go where the terminals are here. Try and sort of surprise in to lift it up a little bit. Something like that. You can see that that's starting to come away now. And then just maybe go around, but don't go in too far because you don't want to scratch the bed. Just around the edge like this. Because there's also these little pins for alignment. So now, with the old voice coil out, you can see, look at how black that is. That's definitely been overdriven and blown. It's burnt out. That should be nice shiny copper, like this one here. So look at the difference in those. If the camera had focused, but you can see anyway. So that is destined for the bin. Now just make sure when you're looking at this that it's clean. There's no bits left in this hole, so you want this hole to be relatively clear and empty. Sometimes this old voice coil can sort of deform and bits of wire can come off and be sat in there. What you can do is sort of turn it upside down and just shake it like that. And another way, if you want to double make sure that it's nice and clean, is if you get a piece of paper or something like this, and if you just get the corner, put it in the track like so, and just sort of bring it around like this. And then that will bring any other bits of rubbish out. You can see there's a bit of crap come out there. You don't necessarily have to do that, but it can make a difference if there's bits in there and you pick them out. Anyway, after that, get the new diaphragm and voice coil. Now align up these two notches here with the notches there and the 3 screw holes, and then the tabs. Make sure the tabs are poking through the back where the heatsink is. Settle that over, and then you should be able to just sort of push this on, and it should sit pretty flush down here. Have a quick look around, make sure you're in. It is raised a little bit there, but that'll be okay once we put the top section down. This will clamp it into place. Just make sure all your holes are central around there. And get the top, look for this indent here. That goes where the connectors are at the bottom. So line that up. Like so. Give it a bit of a jiggle. Get your screws. And put these back in. and then you can tighten these down, but don't just tighten one. Put them in a ways, and then put the next one in a ways to try and apply more even pressure. If you just tighten one all the way and then do the others, you can warp and deform the voice coil. So you can warp and deform the diaphragm and the voice coil if you're doing that. So just go around bit by bit by bit. And then nip them up a little bit. They don't have to be crazy tight. Just enough so there's a bit of resistance, and then go a little touch more. And then once you're done, just pull on the assembly, make sure there's no movement, make sure it's solid. And you should be good to go. So we can put this back in the cabinet now and try it. I'm going to do the other one, and then I'll put it in the cabinet, so we've got a pair done, basically, because both of these are blown on a pair. Okay, so with the voice coil diaphragm changed in this unit, it's now ready to go back in. So I'm going to put this onto the horn. Just be careful as you're putting it in not to cross thread it. You need to put this straight and then just turn it gently, don't force it. So try and sort of sit it in, get it to find its own place pretty much. Then take a little bit of turning backwards and forwards to find the start of the thread. It is plastic on plastic, which isn't brilliant, but again, it's what you pay for. So there we go, that's the start of the thread, and you can see it's going in level and flat there, so I'm not having to put much force of anything on it. I could turn this with one finger virtually. There's no resistance through most of the thread. You may start to find a little bit where it's a little tight because of the glue that's still on there, and it'll start to tighten up. Now what you do is just turn this as tight as you can by hand, and then when it's insecure and it's not easily just turning back, I would leave it there. You could, if you wanted to, put the chisel or whatever in and go tighter, but it doesn't really need it. So just have it hand tight as you can. And you want these wires here, paying attention to the big one and the small one. They'll only go around that way, one way. And we put the red one onto the big one. Big to big and small to small. And you'll just sort of hear them click as you're pushing these back on. These can be a pain to do as well, especially when you've got a camera in your face and you're trying to see what you're doing. So, but listen, you hear that click then, something like that, and you'll also know they're on because you won't be able to just pull them off easily. They'll be on tight enough so they're not going to fall off. And that's that. So now we can drop the plate amp back in. Also, if you disconnected that wire for the front LED, don't forget to plug that back in. You can tell which way that goes in because there's a groove on the top of it there, and there's a slit in the connector here. So just pop that in. Set the plate amp back in so it's flush. And we'll just put a couple of screws in first for testing purposes. I also would advise not using an electric drill or screwdriver for these, especially when you're putting them back in, because it's very easy to over tighten them and just ruin the thread on the cabinet, because these are just literally self-tappers into the plastic. If you over tighten them, they will just shear off and then this will be loose and you start getting farting and rattling. So I recommend you do it by hand. Okay, so with it back together and a couple of screws in, I'm just going to test it at this point before we put it all together. Obviously you can put all the screws in and then try it, but I'm just, for the sake of this video, only putting a couple in. Okay, so let's try it with a bit of music first. So you can hear the difference, you can hear the top end sparkles back. And now with the microphone, 1, 2, 2, 2. So yeah, that's done the job for these ones. That's how you change the diaphragm in the compression driver, or change the whole compression driver, in an Alto TS315, 312, 310, 08, whichever size. Pretty much all the same thing. Hopefully this was somewhat helpful to you, and you found it useful, or tips and advice. Any questions, put them in the comment section down below. And if you've done this yourself successfully, let us know that as well in the comments. Please leave a like if you liked it, and subscribe for future random sound and technology videos like this one. Thanks for watching.